Welcome to Pigeon River Farm, doing farming right. I'm Robert Brown, the owner of Pigeon River Farm. Thank you for viewing. Good evening. In this episode, we're going to discuss Scottish Highland Cattle. The reason we've had the Scottish Highland Cattle, they have so many attributes that have been beneficial on the farm, and this is a real-world experience, not just reading out of a book. The Scottish Highland Cattle, first off, are an ancient breed coming out of the Highlands of Scotland in the UK. They are very docile animals for the most part. They're easy to handle. They look very dangerous because of the horns, and you have to use a lot of caution around the animals. But on the flip side is they don't have a mean streak in them like a lot of the other breeds. A lot of the really domesticated breeds, specifically the bulls, a reference in Jersey, a Holstein, the dairy breeds, the bulls are extremely aggressive. In the case of the Scottish Highland, they're actually the polar opposite. They're very, very docile. But they're very protective. When the calves are born and they show any sign of distress whatsoever, including just even our dogs, the bull will be much more aggressive. We have a lot of wolves in our area here. Now we have a phenomenal fence, so the threat of the wolves getting into the pasture, going after both the cattle or the goats, is very minimal, simply because of the integrity of the fence. But we've had a couple occasions where the wolf pack has been back by the river, and we could hear them, and so could the cattle. And it was very interesting watching the cattle. I'm fortunate I don't have video of this. Or watching the cattle actually put up a defensive line, a protective line for the calves to protect them. And I tell you, the Scottish Highland cows and bull would be forced to be reckoned with. So it gives us a sense of comfort here just to know that they're able to protect their own. They also are very efficient. One of the things that we've learned about the Scottish Highland cattle compared to some of the other breeds that we have on the farm is their efficiency, specifically to wintertime. Since being at the 45th parallel here, we ended up with a long winter, typically can go 5 to 6 months, and so that's a lot of cold temperatures, and they just prosper. Unlike the other breeds that when it gets extremely cold, we had a cycle of sub-zero weather, lasted about 12 days. And during that, the Scottish Highland cattle were actually doing just fine, but the Angus that we have, you could tell they were a little bit stressed. It was just too hard on them during that time. So the efficiencies of what they eat, we observe that and see how much hay is actually consumed. And you can tell with the Scottish Highland cattle, they don't need the excess hay to keep warm, where in the case of the Angus, they do. So we've been very impressed. They worked for us, and if you're looking at cattle, they're actually a very good breed. The taste from a meat standpoint is just absolutely off the chart. I can't say enough good about the Scottish Highland meat. And they are able to breed. We allow bull there year-round, so we do breed year-round, and we've had calves born when it's sub-zero. The only time that both from a calving and even just from an animal health standpoint is when we get extreme temperatures. So if you're looking at it to raise Scottish Highland cattle in the southern tier states, remember that it's one of the biggest threats is the extreme heat. Once it gets in the 90s and humid, they really struggle. That's when we actually let them into the barn or in the barnyard to get protection from the heat. We don't worry about the cold, we actually worry about the heat. And I've gone to the point of actually running sprinklers out in the pasture. We've got one mud hole that's, I don't care for it, but it's out there, and that actually is used for the cattle also. So they need the reprieve from the heat. But cold is the climate that they were, they naturally came from, the mountains of Scotland. Figure that's up at the Arctic Circle. So you have the extremely short days and extreme cold temperatures, and they just prosper. So if you're thinking about cattle on your farm, I would definitely throw the Scottish Highland into the ring there as something to consider. Easy to take care of, manage fine, long living. We got a couple of our cows here that are getting on 20 years old, and they've put out a calf every year. with no problem, and they're a low stress environment. I guess that's one thing I wanted to make comment of. They're not really an animal to have if you have a high stress environment. They don't prosper well. I've observed this at other farms. So that's one thing you got to think about is the animal welfare model that you have in place is critical to the type of breed. No animal should be subjected to a stressful environment. But I can tell you specifically the Scottish Highland cattle don't do well in that environment. Well, I thank you very much and have a great evening.